Okay, good evening. I'm Josh Johnson. This is First Alert Weather Extra. It is 9:40. Hope you'll forgive the late start tonight. We are simul streaming this all over creation. We are streaming this on the WSFA First Alert Weather app. We're streaming it on the news app. We're streaming it on the entire WSFA family of apps. If you have a connected kind of a smart TV, a TV that has apps, you can find us there, too, to search WSFA. And you don't have any of those. Many of you may be watching this on Facebook and YouTube. And I would invite those of you who are streaming this now on the WSFA app on your TV, if you're near a computer, a tablet, a mobile device, and you can get on Facebook or YouTube, if you leave comments, I can see them. So we can make this sort of an interactive thing here. So a lot happening, obviously, with old Milton. We have major problems headed for Florida. All right, let's begin with a look in at the high-resolution satellite data. We'll use infrared because it's dark, so the visible imagery wouldn't help us very much. Here is very compact, exceptionally powerful Hurricane Milton, a Category 5 storm with incredible maximum sustained winds at 180 miles an hour. And the last central pressure I saw was down to 897. That is off the charts low. Hurricanes work because of what's called a pressure gradient force. Shortening this and condensing this and simplifying this, air wants to move from high pressure to low pressure. That's what creates wind, is something called the pressure gradient force, because that helps the atmosphere equalize things. When we remove air from an area of high pressure, that tends to lower the pressure. When we add air to an area of lower pressure, that tends to raise it. So the atmosphere is all about equilibrium, right? So we have this thing called the pressure gradient force. Now, the issue with a hurricane is you get an incredible amount of gradient there. Right? You go from high pressure to low pressure really fast. So I'll take the data off the screen here. Just remember, in the center of this thing down here, you've got a pressure of 897 millibars. If you were to go 75, 100 miles out from this storm in any direction, the pressure would be closer to 1,000 millibars. Standard atmospheric pressure is around 1,012 millibars. So that creates a really strong gradient here between this area of high pressure and this area of extremely low pressure. And remember, that air tends to flow from the high towards the low. When you pack them together like this, when you have high pressure and you have such an incredible low pressure here in the center, that air tends to just rush into that extremely rapidly, right? So when we talk about a storm's minimum central pressure, it matters because that's what is creating the powerful wind inside the eye wall. So you get a strong rush of wind in towards the center. Now, in the northern hemisphere, there's another force involved called the Coriolis effect that causes that air to, as it moves towards from high pressure to low pressure, it gets bent towards the right. So what that does is that's what ends up creating the circulation around a hurricane, because the Coriolis effect bends that air around to the right. You also have some frictional effects, but over ocean water, those are minimal. So that's when we talk about a hurricane's central pressure being low, that's why it matters. Couple of other factors here. The pressure continues to drop in this storm, so the wind usually takes some time to catch up to the pressure, meaning your pressure falls start and the wind stays the same. And then a few hours later, that wind speed begins to go up as the mass fields sort of respond to this incredibly rapid change in atmospheric pressure associated with a very powerful hurricane. So that's where we are right now. Looks like we're now up to 914. And the wind has gone down to 165. Now, the reason for that is we're in the midst of what's called an eye wall replacement cycle. The National Hurricane Center's 10 o'clock advisory has just updated here. Milton at 897 had the fifth lowest central pressure in the history of the Atlantic Basin. Now, the Atlantic Basin is the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, and the rest of the Atlantic. That's number 5 out of all that real estate. That's a huge deal. So what's happened here, is an eye wall replacement cycle. So we'll get into the physics of that in a moment, just temporarily. So you get an eye on a hurricane that's really small, and it gets smaller as the hurricane gets stronger. Eventually what happens, due to some really complex thermodynamics and physics here, an outer eye wall forms, and you replace it. This initial eye wall will sort of just fizzle out, and then this new outer eye wall will replace it, and it will condense in. It will shrink in until it reaches roughly the same size as before. Then it will die, and a new outer eye wall will form. This is called the eye wall replacement cycle, and yeah, it can be a problem for a hurricane. If you will see, while this is happening, the hurricane's pressure will rise, the wind speed will drop. That's what's happened with Milton. So I will not use the phrase weakened, because it really hasn't weakened. It's just had a little bit of an eye wall replacement cycle, that is normal. Okay, more from the National Hurricane Center's new forecast package. Milton will move east-northeast off the southeast Atlantic coast. It's still a Category 5 storm. The track really hasn't changed much. It's a little faster than the model consensus. The models are a little slower than the National Hurricane Center forecast. Now, what's going to happen next with Milton? What's the next big thing? So these eye wall replacement cycles will continue. Those will lead to sort of transient changes in the intensity of the storm. But what I'm watching here, look up here at the top. See this right here? See how these clouds up here are rushing towards the east? That is a fairly strong belt of wind on the north side of Milton. That's actually part of the wind that's helping shove Milton down towards the south so far. So what happens next here is Milton stays very strong. The intensity will fluctuate based on eye wall replacement cycles between now and this time tomorrow. Then as we get into late Tuesday night and Wednesday, and Milton gets up here in the central, kind of east central Gulf of Mexico, the amount of wind shear is going to go up. Hurricanes don't like wind shear. That disturbs their inner circulation quite a bit. So that's going to happen. And there's likely going to be some dry air entrainment in this as well as it approaches the west central coast of Florida. So what does that mean? It means that the intensity will likely, from a wind speed perspective, the wind speeds will drop. How far? We don't know. Probably down 135, 130, somewhere in there at landfall. So, but what I want you to understand here is, as this approaches Florida's coast, and we'll back things up here, and we'll get back into kind of some more complicated concepts here. So remember, as this thing is coming up through here, it will have had Category 5 wind speeds for 24 to 48 hours. That's going to pool tons and tons and tons of water down here on the southeastern and eastern side of the hurricane. As it approaches the coast and kind of makes that final landfall, all that water will not respond to a decrease in wind speed instantaneously. If the wind speed goes down, there's a delay there in the water level going down, right? This is called storm surge. Perspective. But that similar concept will likely unfold here, where yes, there is a reduction in wind speed, but no, it really doesn't matter from a storm surge perspective because there's not enough time for those waters to calm down. The other thing we'll point out, this is really, I think, the chief concern here. Yes, the wind damage will be bad. There will be lots and lots and lots of power outages. But the storm surge is the main player. And of particular concern would be a track that comes in around St. Petersburg and then cuts through like this. Anywhere just near or on the north side of Tampa Bay would be catastrophic, because then all of this water that hits the coast to the south gets funneled into Tampa Bay. And then there's nowhere for it to go. It can't escape, so it floods everything. That would be a kind of doomsday scenario here, where you would see historic flooding on a scale that Tampa Bay has never seen before. And just so you know, those of you who've watched and talked to me for a while, you know I'm not really a hype guy. The National Hurricane Center says this in their statement: Milton has the potential to be one of the most destructive hurricanes on record for west central Florida. So I'm not the only one that sees this and is gravely concerned about it. Now, on the flip side of that, just specific to Tampa, if the track comes in more around Sarasota, remember the flow of air around the hurricane is counterclockwise. That would mean the wind over Tampa Bay would be blowing the water out of the bay, and you would have very little flooding around Tampa Bay. So it will really depend on the precise nature of the track. If the track goes a little south of Tampa Bay, the main flooding threat would be more down towards Sarasota, Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, maybe even as far south as Venice. If this comes farther north and the track comes in here very near or just north of Tampa Bay, around Largo, East Lake, Spring Hill, then you're looking at catastrophic flooding into Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay floods very easily due to storm surge. We saw it with Helene. Helene was 100 miles offshore and put 10 to 12 feet of water in Tampa Bay. That's bad news, right? So it can definitely be, it can get away from you pretty quick in terms of the storm surge risk from this hurricane in the Tampa Bay area. Now, many of you may have family or friends who live in Orlando. For them, what I would recommend is you need to be prepared for the possibility of losing your electrical service for multiple days. You need to be prepared for the possibility that many roads may not be very drivable for a few days. For some school systems, it's fall break. Some of you may have family or friends who are visiting Disney or Universal or any of the big parks in Orlando. My advice again would be take the time tonight and tomorrow. It won't be fun. It will be a madhouse. But get to a grocery store. If you're going to stay, get to a grocery store. Get some non-perishable food items. Don't forget a can opener. If you have canned goods, buy a little can opener there in the store. Have some water. Have lots of as much water. Get a case of water if you don't have water service at where you're staying. And frankly, get some anyway, just in case you were to lose that water service. So non-perishable food items, batteries, imported medications, things like that. If you have family or friends that are in Orlando, whether to evacuate or not is a personal decision. It will not be an easy drive. Just plan on that. It will be a difficult, slow trip north. And remember, we have some cities up here where normally you could go, right? Like Valdosta and on up into South Georgia, you could just cruise up on 75. But Valdosta's had a ton of damage from Helene. A lot of the hotels there are already occupied by power crews and things like that. So there you go. Let's get to the questions, and I just have a couple of minutes left before WSFA 12 News at 10. Grandson's in Clearwater. He's leaving in the morning. Is that okay? It is. He's going to have a tough drive. Just take it easy, take it slow. And look, if he gets out and there's a ton of traffic, he doesn't have to make it all the way to Alabama or Georgia. If he can just find a hotel room anywhere more than about 15 miles away from the Gulf or the Bay, he'll be fine. The wind will be scary, but stay hunkered down, stay in the hotel, and your odds are very, very good. The main threat to human life in this storm is going to be storm surge flooding near the immediate coast. That's not to say the wind will not cause some fatalities, but when we look at a storm like this, the wind will likely cause fatalities in the single digits. The storm surge could cause fatalities in the double or triple digits. So that's the mindset here is if you can't reach absolute safety, maybe you can reach a safer position than right near the water, right? Right near the water is where you don't want to be. If you can make it 10 miles inland and take your chances with the wind and stay hunkered down, that's a safer alternative than just hanging out right on the bay. So there you go. All righty, so I'm going to wind this thing down. Thank you as always for participating in tonight's live stream. We stream this on every WSFA app and on Facebook and YouTube. So a true multicast. You can also stream WSFA 12 News at 10, which begins in 4 minutes and 23 seconds. Right here on this live stream. If you're near a television, you can watch it as well. Just fire up WSFA. So take it easy. We'll have more updates. I'll update the Facebook page throughout the night tonight. We'll also have updates tomorrow all day on Milton and how it's affecting the state of Florida and how you can help guide your family and friends and colleagues and whoever's down in Florida. Maybe you can help be a conduit of information for us and help us positively affect people down there. Hope you all have a wonderful